Some people say Donald Trump is acting like a king. No, he's not. He's acting like an American president. He's acting like George Washington. At no time in the history of the United States has the presidency been so closely aligned with, and presidential power been so clearly consolidated in, one person as today, except for the very beginning. So let's talk about what Donald Trump and George Washington have in common. And it's more than you might think. It's time for another edition of the Hater's Guide to the Founding Fathers, so strap in for story time. Hey folks, I'm Tad Sturmer. I'm an American scholar of resistance history and the author of the forthcoming book, A Resistance History of the United States. So now Trump, in his rush to turn the White House into a casino and look like one, he's doing things like declaring the $600 billion that he says the EU agreed to in their trade deal with him, not with the US, with him of course, was a personal gift. $600 billion just to him to do whatever he wanted, not a pledge in existing and future investment from the EU into American businesses or purchases of goods, but a personal gift to him to deploy for American businesses just personally to do whatever he wanted to with. So really, there's no United States anymore, just Trump. His regime and their interests, bow down, pay your fealty, go away. But it's been like that before. At the very beginning, just the enslavers, their regime, their interests. Now, if you like George Washington and really know him, I suspect you love Donald Trump. A lot of historians, nationalists on the right, nationalists on the left, doesn't really matter, they really tell the same story about Washington. The nationalists on the right say, greatest man ever. Sure, he exploited enslaved people, but hey, man of his time, everybody was doing it. But he established the greatest country the world had ever seen, keep your eyes on the ball. Nationalists on the left say pretty much the same thing. Greatest man ever. Sure, he exploited people, but he felt bad about it. And it was worth it because he created the greatest country the world had ever seen. Scoreboard, pay attention. The rest of us, those who are just historians, who don't need to show up to work wrapped in a flag, just call it like we see it. And that Washington and Trump looks very different to us. Let's look at the case of one person, one woman, one black woman, who told George and Martha Washington to shove their greatness, and what that says about the first president and what it says about this one. On May 21st, 1796, Ona Judge was all of 22 years old, and she'd had enough of the Washingtons. Enslaved by them for her whole life and exploited to serve Martha's personal needs since she was 10. 10! Ona arrived with the Washingtons in Philadelphia when it became the temporary capital. And there she saw an alternative history playing out right in front of her eyes. Philadelphia, it was a city within a city of free black people alongside the white city, a black city that was dynamic and thriving and robust with churches, schools, institutions, showing Ona that what she was used to, what she thought was the world, wasn't necessary, wasn't the only option. There were other possibilities, another future. I mean, in her free time, she had the chance to explore a bit of that city. Going to the theater, talking to people, meeting with them, hearing about those other alternatives. And then she heard that she could join them. Unlike every single other state, Pennsylvania had passed a law actually making enslaved people free. All men created equal, who knew? None of the other states seem to have gotten that memo. And that law passed by Pennsylvania applied to people like Ona. If an enslaver took a person in bondage to Philadelphia, or any place in Pennsylvania, and they remained there for more than 6 months, then that enslaved person would be free, no string attached, automatically. And it was happening. And in fact, there are some people who were counting on it, who were gaming it. Edmund Randolph, the first Attorney General of the United States, he couldn't free his enslaved people in Virginia, but he'd swallowed the Kool-Aid about the revolution. He wanted to. But Edmund, you see, was in debt, mountains of it, and in Virginia, he could probably jump through all the legal hoops he needed to free them, but those formerly enslaved people would still be the property of his creditors. Virginia was going to Virginia. But moving to Philadelphia, as part of the new government, member of the first cabinet, gave him, and more importantly, it gave them, an out. So he moved all of his enslaved people to Philadelphia with him, became a Pennsylvania citizen, and waited when 6 months hit. Then they told him, thanks boss, we're heading out tomorrow. Randolph said, gotcha, have a good one. Then he had an idea. He'd heard the Washingtons say things like, oh, how I wish I could be rid of slavery. It's deeply regrettable. And he thought they meant it. So he went to Martha and he said, hey, my people came and told me they're bailing. Cool, right? You could do it too, and here's how. It's possible that Ona was standing right there and she started doing the math. 2, 3. But George, not having it. His property and Martha's property was their property. Roundup was a nice guy, but he was a kid. Let money walk out the door. Insane. Do away with slavery. He'd talk about it. Do away with enslaved people over his dead body, particularly if they were his enslaved people. Now, George, already very Trumpian. Did he create anything in his life? No. Did he build anything? No. Was he clever or insightful? Hardly. Did he have terrible style and taste? Oh, you bet. Was his entire existence made possible through the direct exploitation of other people almost from the day he was born? No, including the day he was born. Oh, yeah. And did he like it that way? Absolutely. Did he want to keep it that way? Oh, absolutely. It was his thing. So no bit of talking property was going to rob him. He worked out a plan to rotate enslaved people out of Philadelphia and back to Virginia when they hit like 5 months and 30 days. It was elaborate, it was devious, and it was illegal. Pennsylvanians had learned that enslavers were trying to do just that, to evade the law. So they passed another law in 1788 saying, no, you can't do that. Doesn't matter your status. What matters is their status. They're here, they're free. So George needed to engage in a criminal conspiracy to defraud people of their liberty as President of the United States, to keep them imprisoned. Why? Law didn't apply to him. But even so, he told his secretary to keep it quiet. Do not let his enslaved people know. Manage it in a way that will deceive both them and the public. His words, no paraphrase. A way that will deceive both them and the public. Ona wasn't having it. She had options. The free black people she met every day not only told her so, they showed her so. And they told her, we can get you out of here. Your freedom is just out there. It's waiting for you, and we can help you get it. But like every other enslaved person was realizing after the War for Independence, the only way that was going to happen was by running from the Patriots, not hanging with them. And then Ona learned something to make being in bondage even worse. She was going to be given like a set of china or a horse as a wedding gift to Martha's granddaughter, Eliza. Now, Martha was no joy and treasure, but Eliza was a nightmare. No way Ona was going to her. So Ona took off May 21st. That was her personal resistance against the abusive authority of slavery and the Washingtons. And she could have been excused for thinking that getting away from them would do the trick. After all, a bunch of enslaved people had done it at Mount Vernon during the war. But what Ona might not have been banking on was that things had changed. Things sucked under the British colonial order, no doubt. But at least the entire weight of the imperial government wasn't brought to bear against every enslaved person. They weren't an explicit basis of political power, and there wasn't an entire legal regime established to make sure they remained property even if they ran away. But in the new United States, big difference there was. Now, one of the things that really rubbed Washington and other enslavers the wrong way was that the British during the war had enabled thousands of enslaved people to gain their freedom by going to the British lines. We call them black loyalists. But Washington and John Jay and Benjamin Franklin, who were part of the negotiating team to end the war, enslavers all, they found an out. They put into the Treaty of Paris that gave the United States its independence and ended the war, a clause that erased the independence of all of those formerly enslaved and now free people with the British. The British had to return them by the terms of the treaty. The Patriots said they were property. And when Washington met with the British Commander-in-Chief of North America, Guy Carleton, to hash all that out, it was one of the first things Washington wanted to get straight. Hey, our property, give it back. Treaty says so. Carleton, though, didn't see it that way. He said, no, you say property. I see people walking, talking, doing all people stuff, not property. That just tends to sit there. We'll return property. These are people. Washington was like, no, property, mine, gimme. But Carleton went, nah, people. See, eyes, legs, minds, people. They move and everything. And we sort of gave them a word, so they're going to stay free. And if you try to grab them, we'll arrest you and kick this whole thing off again. Washington had nothing. Well, he had a lot of anger, and he had a lot of resentment. He was good at both of those things. That wasn't going to happen again. It needed to be clear, so it was built into the Constitution of the United States, the founding document. Enslaved people were going to be property and had to be given back no matter where they were found. So it was right there, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3. No person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the property to whom such service or labor may be due. They can't be given their freedom. Nothing can be done with them. They have to be given back as soon as the claimant comes. Approved by the convention in Philadelphia in 1787 unanimously. And then that wasn't even enough. When enslaved people learned that all kinds of free black people were setting up lives in Canada and finding out that even other states in the North, like Massachusetts, were allowing enslaved people to go free, it started saying, I'll take my chances. I'm out of here. So the first federal Congress, after declaring that only free white persons could be citizens, passed the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 to put even more federal power behind it. Constitution not enough, tightening the hold on slavery even further. Land of the free, home of the brave, it made a crime to even help an enslaved person regain their freedom. Ona knew that the minute she stepped out of that house in Philadelphia in 1796, that she was making herself a criminal, sure, but she was also making everyone she touched and who touched her a criminal. Everyone who helped, everyone who harbored, everyone who knew where she was and didn't say something when asked, a federal crime. All to support the private property rights of enslavers such as Washington. But Washington didn't need the law. He didn't care. He had the power of the presidency. It was his personal business. The entire infrastructure of the new federal government, his to exploit. So what did he do? He called the Secretary of the Treasury for help. Didn't he have all these tax and revenue officers everywhere? Couldn't they help Washington find Ona and get her back? The Secretary of the Treasury, Oliver Wolcott, was like, yeah, sure. And then he sent a note to one of his officials in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a guy named Joseph Whipple, putting it on him, because Washington had heard that's where Ona had gone to, there in Portsmouth. Now that made Washington happy. He told Whipple to grab Ona and put her on a boat back to Virginia. Well, that didn't make Whipple happy. He told Washington, yeah, I'll do what I can. Maybe I can talk to her, but you're the president. You signed this law. Shouldn't you abide by it? Because it said that Ona would have to go in front of a court, that Washington would have to prove his claim to her. Nah. Like the Pennsylvania law giving freedom to enslaved people, Washington didn't think that laws that got in the way of his personal business were laws that he needed to pay any attention to. Put Ona on the boat. And by the way, Washington told him, she probably wanted to go back to Virginia anyway. They were good enslavers. And Ona was just a simple girl. She'd probably been lied to, enticed away, probably by a Frenchman. And by the way, black people lie. And by the way, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Ona still had family at Mount Vernon, and they might not be treated very well because of her. So it's kind of a big deal for them too. So Whipple was stuck. On the one side, there's Washington, the most powerful man in the country, breathing down his neck. On the other, there's everybody else and the law. He couldn't take her. There'd be a riot, he said. The people in Portsmouth thought slavery was wrong, and they liked Ona, her being like a person and not property, And another reminder, the law required Washington to go before a court. So Whipple couldn't really just put her on a ship. That really wasn't an option. But maybe Whipple could persuade her to go back, her being a person and everything, if she really wanted to go anyway, as Washington had said. So Whipple talked to Ona. She didn't know what Washington was talking about. She hated it with them. Slavery sucks. The Washingtons were awful. She bailed because she wanted to, be free, full stop. Now, because her family was there, and she caught that whiff of a threat from Washington, she might think about going back, really. But the Washingtons would have to agree that she was free and let her go when she died. She knew they weren't long for this world anyway, but she wasn't about to return to slavery. No way. Whipple was stoked. He could get behind that, right? Freedom in exchange for more service, fine, win-win. Should have been done during the Revolutionary War, but he'll take it from there. When Washington heard about it, he flipped. No way, he'd never agree to that deal. Maybe someday he could see how slavery should end, but Ona was ungrateful. She'd harmed them by taking off. Martha had to put on her own clothes. She had to get herself up in the morning. How could they make a deal with her? If they did that, pretty soon other people would, want freedom. And then where would they be? Getting their own coffee. Imagine that. And by the way, and you can put this into Trump's voice, Ona was lying. All black people, they lie. Washington alone knew her truth. He told Whipple not to listen to the fake news from Ona. What did she know about what she did and thought and wanted? Washington knew she was enticed away. It wasn't her idea. There was this Frenchman and these other black people, and they all lie, and she probably believed those people who would abandon her anyway. And he and Martha were great to her, and Ona knew that, and Washington had receipts, and there was this Frenchman, and Ona was lying. And George Washington would tell Whipple what Ona really thought. No need to listen to Ona. Now, Whipple, to his credit, got pretty cheeky with George. Well, he still can't grab her. Mobs and riots, and the law. But here's an idea, George. There are a lot of black people going to New England from the South. I mean, waves and waves of them. If you don't like it, maybe, and this is just an idea, you can free them, even gradually. Maybe let them know that someday they might not be property, then they might not leave, and you won't have this problem. Washington was like, nah, that's just silly. Maybe someday, after I'm dead, and Martha's dead too, and that won't be our problem. But Washington did learn a lesson from Whipple. Don't trust New Englanders, do-gooders. He needed to rely on his own people, who understood what was up. Screw Whipple's nuance about, morality and the law. So Washington turned to his awful nephew to get Ona, again, an explicit violation of the Fugitive Slave Act. Forget about courts. That didn't apply to Washington. And now he had a reputation to protect. Enslaved people couldn't do that to him. There was a higher law, that of abusive authority. And there was a bonus. Ona had a child, ka-ching. More value from Martha. That might make it all even worth it. 2 for the price of 1. Go get them, ignore the law, put them on a boat, bring them back. So the nephew gave it a shot. He even talked to Ona. She was like, no. So the nephew went back to where he was staying at the house of a U.S. Senator, John Langdon. He got wasted and told the senator what he was going to do the next day, grab Ona and her baby daughter and put them on a ship that he had waiting. The senator thought, well, if you don't care about the law, then maybe I don't either. And he got word to Ona to take her daughter and get out of town, that the nephew was coming for her. As far as the Fugitive Slave Act was concerned, that made him a criminal too. Right then and there, he didn't care. Now, Ona lived the rest of her life as a fugitive under that law, but at least she didn't live it in chains at Mount Vernon. And Washington died a few months later. But that one episode, about one person, one relationship, one part of Washington's life, with his perspective on the world, tells you everything that you need to know about the guy and about how he saw the presidency and its capacity for abuse. It was an opportunity. It was his to use as he saw it. And it's been there since the beginning, and it's there now. There's never been a code of conduct that tells anyone what a president can't do, only what they shouldn't do. And should and shouldn't, rather than can and cannot, have always been a relative measure. Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Johnson, Warren Harding, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump. The examples are there. As the original opponents to the Constitution, the anti-federalists, some of my favorites, pointed out, the Constitution created a presidency more powerful than any British king. Just wait for the guy, and it will be a guy who will exploit it in every possible way. There are no guards, there are no real checks. That's not an if, that's a when. It's always been there. It was there for Washington, and he took it. And it's there for Trump, and he's taken it. And if Washington is the father of this country, think about what that truly means. Take it seriously. And about Trump being his legitimate heir. Don't like it? Change it. Because self-interest on this level doesn't recognize your term limits. Term limits aren't in the original Constitution anyway. So as Stephen Miller and all the other ultra-nationalists who care about originalism say, it's not what the framers intended. It's not in the original document. Washington would have approved. After all, yeah, he did step down after 2 terms, but he never said that anyone else needed to.